What would you do if your father, a beloved Hollywood legend, left behind a locked journal, and inside it, you found terrifying words like "he's slipping away" and "I think he knows what I did"? Now imagine that same father, the smiling, peace-promoting, award-winning filmmaker, had just been found stabbed to death in his multi-million-dollar Brentwood mansion, alongside your mother. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And your own brother, the one who lived just steps away in the guest house, had been arrested for the murder. This isn't a script from a Hollywood thriller. This is the real-life horror Romy Reiner now finds herself living through. And for the first time, she's decided to break her silence. But not for fame, not for sympathy. Because she says she was forced to hide the truth, and now, the world deserves to know what was inside that journal. Her words, "What I found scared me. It wasn't just about Nick. It was about all of us. My father kept secrets, dangerous ones. So, what exactly was Rob Reiner hiding?" Let's rewind. For most of America, Rob Reiner wasn't just a director. He was a cultural comfort zone. The man behind When Harry Met Sally, A Few Good Men, The Princess Bride. He was that voice of steady, liberal reason. Always calm, always just. But behind the closed doors of a Brentwood estate, a $13.5 million fortress of wealth, status, and silence, something much darker was brewing. Because on the surface, everything seemed fine. Until it wasn't. Until Rob and his wife Michelle were found fatally stabbed, multiple sharp force injuries, the coroner's report said, sprawled across the marble floor of their study. And the only other person on the property that night? Their son, Nick Reiner. He had lived in the guest house for years. In and out of rehab. Quiet. Off the radar. But on that night, police say he wasn't just present. He was responsible. Arrested within hours. 2 counts of first-degree murder. No bail. The nation gasped. The headlines screamed. The world asked, why would he do this? But here's the thing. Maybe that's the wrong question. Because Romy Reiner, the youngest of the family, the quiet one, the one who never wanted the spotlight, is now saying there's more to this story. A lot more. In the days that followed the murder, Romy says she returned to the family estate not to mourn, but to search, to understand, to find whatever answers were left behind. That's when she found it. Behind a locked cabinet in Rob's private study. A place no one, not even Michelle, ever touched. A dusty, leather-bound journal, tied shut with twine. Faded initials etched into the back cover, RR, and tucked inside, entries that chilled her blood, writings about family tensions, pages devoted to Nick, lines written in shaky script. He's slipping, and I don't know how to stop it. Michelle is asking questions. If Romy finds this, I'm sorry, why would a man like Rob Reiner, adored by millions, feel the need to hide a journal? And more importantly, what did he mean by "I'm sorry"? Romy didn't want to believe it at first. After all, this was her dad, her protector, her rock, the man who gave impassioned speeches about truth and democracy, who took her to set when she was a child, who grilled steaks on Sundays and read poetry aloud after dinner. But as she read deeper, her image of him began to fracture. It started with cryptic mentions. The boy isn't safe. I made a mistake. What happened in '94? Then came the diagrams. Weird drawings. Symbols. Some circled in red. And names. Famous names. Some with check marks. Others crossed out. And one envelope, sealed, addressed to her. Inside, a note that simply read, I did what I had to do. You'll understand one day. Don't trust everything you hear, especially not about me. At that moment, Romy says something shifted inside her. She realized this wasn't just a tragedy. It was a story, one that had been carefully crafted and just as carefully buried. But not anymore. What we're about to share with you is the result of months of silence, of hidden grief, of a daughter wrestling with whether to protect her father's legacy or honor the truth he tried so desperately to suppress. You'll hear excerpts from the journal. You'll see connections between family events that were never publicized. And you'll understand why Romy says, this was never just about my brother losing control. This was a chain reaction, a chain that started long before any knife was drawn. So if you think this is just another Hollywood true crime story, think again. This is about secrets. This is about family. This is about the things we never say, even to the people we love, especially them. Because sometimes, The scariest monsters aren't the ones we see on screen. They're the ones we sit across from at dinner. You might be wondering, why now? Why did Romy decide to come forward now, months after the tragedy? Here's what she said in her first public statement. I was scared. I didn't want people to think I was betraying my father. But I realized silence wasn't helping anyone. Especially not Nick. Especially not me. And here's the part that still haunts her. I was forced to hide it. At first, I didn't even want to open it. But the more I read, the more I realized it wasn't about protecting him. It was about telling the truth he never could say out loud. Let that sink in. A daughter, standing over her parents' blood-stained floor, holding the words her father never meant to be read, and deciding, finally, that silence is the real crime. So what's inside the journal? And how does it connect to Nick's unraveling, the night of the murder, and a secret the family may have buried for decades? We'll go there. But first, we have to start with that night. The night it all fell apart. The screaming, the broken glass, the blood trail, the odd positioning of the bodies, the bizarre 911 call where Nick allegedly said, "It's done. They're free now." Free from what, Nick? That's the question. And the answer might be hiding in that journal. Because when Romy flipped to one particular page, near the back, ink smudged and jagged, she found one final chilling entry. He's slipping away, and I think he knows what I did. But what did Rob do? And why was he so afraid of Nick finding out? Whatever it was, Romy says it's the reason she can no longer stay quiet. Because, as she put it, everyone thinks they know who Rob Reiner was. But they don't. They only know the version he wanted you to see. What comes next will change that. Forever. And no one, not even Romy, was ready for what she would find next. Have you ever had one of those nights where everything seems off, like the air is too still, or the silence feels heavier than usual? That's exactly what Romy Reiner felt when she got the call. She was halfway through a late-night grocery run. Almond milk, some pre-cut fruit, a bag of kale she'd probably forget about, a quiet, nothing kind of night. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One word on the screen, Brentwood. She didn't answer at first. Another buzz. Then another. Until the phone rang, and this time, it wasn't silence on the other end. It was screaming. What happened inside the Reiner estate that night has been pieced together from police reports, surveillance footage, and what little the neighbors heard. But what Romy saw, that's the part no one told. Because by the time she reached the gates, red and blue lights bathed the white stone driveway like a crime scene from a movie. Only this wasn't a movie. This was her life. Let's rewind. Sunday night. The Reiner estate, an iconic Brentwood property hidden behind manicured hedges and two sets of wrought iron gates, was unusually quiet. Too quiet. Inside the main house, Rob and Michelle Reiner were home. No scheduled guests. No staff after 8 p.m. And in the guest house, just a short walk across the stone path, their son, Nick Reiner, 32 years old. By 10:21 p.m., a neighbor, a retired dentist named Sheila Rowan, called 911. She reported loud banging, possible shouting, and a woman's voice yelling something about help. At 10:34 p.m., LAPD officers arrived. What they found would haunt them. The front door was unlocked. That's unusual, especially for a house like that. Brentwood homes are practically fortresses, but not this time. Officers entered the foyer, chandeliers overhead, fresh orchids on the table. Nothing seemed wrong until they stepped into the main study. That's when everything changed. Rob and Michelle were on the floor. Both were covered in blood, multiple stab wounds. The area around them, a mix of glass shards, broken picture frames, and an overturned chair. Michelle had what appeared to be defensive wounds on her hands. Rob was face down. A smear of blood trailed away from him, suggesting he had tried, even briefly, to crawl. Between them, a bloody letter opener, bent, possibly used in defense. But not the murder weapon. It was found later, in the kitchen sink. Cleaned, but not well. By 10:45 p.m., police had already detained the man wandering barefoot near the back gate. Nick. He was disoriented. Shirtless. His hands were scraped. Blood on his pants. When asked what happened, he allegedly muttered a single sentence. They're free now. What did he mean by that? Free from what? No answer. Romy arrived 15 minutes later, and everything inside her went numb. Police tried to stop her at the gate. She didn't listen. She ran. One officer would later report. She was hysterical. But she kept saying the same thing. Where's Nick? What happened to Nick? Not her parents. Nick. It says everything, doesn't it? Because here's the truth. The Reiner family wasn't exactly a picture of harmony. Rob, the patriarch, was Hollywood royalty. Beloved, respected, untouchable. Michelle, his wife of decades, quiet, elegant, always in his shadow. Romy, the youngest, the artist, the one who escaped the spotlight. And Nick. Nick was the ghost in the guest house. He had always been a troubled soul. Addicted young. In and out of rehab. Often isolated. Rarely spoken about. He was the unspoken sentence in every family interview. And we don't talk about Nick. But that night, Nick became the center of everything. And Romy, the only sibling still speaking to him, felt her entire world fracture. She wasn't allowed inside at first. Crime scene. Go wait in your car, an officer said. But she didn't move. Instead, she looked up at the house, and something caught her eye. The light. The study light. Still on. Still flickering. She knew that lamp. It had a short in the cord. Rob always refused to fix it. Said it reminded him that even perfection has flaws. The kind of poetic nonsense only he would say. Except now, that flickering light felt more like a signal. A pulse. A heartbeat. The last remnants of a night gone completely, horrifyingly wrong. Then came the whispers. Two officers, talking softly. One said, "She's gonna want to see what's in his room." Romy caught it. She locked in. "Whose room?" she asked. The officer flinched. He didn't mean to say it. But it was too late. Because Rob Reiner had a room no one was allowed in. Not even Michelle. The private study. Not the one guests saw. Not the one with Emmys on the shelf and framed photos with Spielberg. The other one. The one down the hall, behind a bookshelf, hidden by a sliding panel. No one talked about that room. Not even Rob. But that night, it wasn't locked. And inside, they found something strange. The bookshelf had been pushed aside. A lamp knocked over. Drawers opened. Papers scattered. Nothing was stolen. But something was missing. One officer noted a dust outline on the shelf. The shape of a journal-sized object. Gone. Or taken. At the time, police didn't think much of it. But Romy? Her gut said otherwise. Because as soon as she heard them mention that room, something in her shifted. What was her father hiding in there? And more importantly, who had taken it? Later, as she sat alone on the front steps, hands trembling, eyes hollow, her phone buzzed again. A text. No name. Just an image. A blurry photo of a notebook. Leather-bound. Twine-wrapped. Underneath it, a message. He kept everything. It's not what you think. She stared at it. Then another message came in. Don't let them bury this too. No name. No number. Just that. The next morning, Romy snuck back into the house. Police tape still fluttered in the breeze. She didn't care. She needed answers. And if what she thought was true, then somewhere inside that mansion was a secret her father never wanted her to find. Something that went beyond family tension, beyond addiction, beyond murder. Because Romy was beginning to suspect this wasn't about a single night. It was about something deeper, something older. And the more she looked, the more she realized the truth may have been sitting in plain sight, just hidden inside her father's words. The ones he never shared, the ones he locked away, in a journal. But when she entered that study the second time, she didn't find the journal. She found something else. A sealed envelope, with her name, written in red ink, and taped to the underside of the desk drawer. Inside, one line. This stays between me and the devil. And beneath it, a key. Not labeled. Not tagged. Just a key. What did it open? And why did her father leave it for her, and not Nick? She didn't know it then, but this key would unlock more than a door. It would unlock the one secret no one in the Reiner family was ever supposed to uncover. Not even in death. What kind of man builds a second office in a mansion and then hides it? Not for work. Not for privacy. But to keep secrets. Not from the world. From his own family. That's what Romy Reiner kept asking herself as she stood in the hallway outside her father's hidden study. A narrow corridor no wider than a closet, with an old bookshelf that served as a door. Her hands shook. The house still smelled like blood. Like loss. Like something sacred had been shattered and nobody knew how to clean it up. But Romy wasn't looking for comfort. She was looking for the truth. And the key in her palm, the one she found inside a sealed envelope, labeled only with her name and a single line that read, "This stays between me and the devil," fit perfectly into a barely visible lock just beneath the lowest shelf. It clicked. The door creaked inward, and Romy stepped into the room her father never wanted her to find. Let's talk about the room. It wasn't big, maybe 10 by 12 feet. No windows. Just one standing lamp in the corner, casting a dull, orange glow. There were no photos, no awards, no memorabilia, just books, dozens of them, stacked floor to ceiling, none in English. Some looked like they were older than the house itself, cracked leather covers, ancient binding, handwritten margins. And in the center, a desk, not the kind you'd expect from a millionaire filmmaker. It was beat up, scarred, covered in pin scratches and faded water rings. On top of the desk, nothing. But Romy knew where to look, because she remembered something. Something from years ago. She had snuck into this room once, when she was 8. Rob had caught her. He didn't yell. He didn't scold. He simply knelt down, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "If you ever come in here again, I'll have to lie to you forever." She never forgot that. And now, standing here as an adult, she realized that wasn't a threat. It was a warning. There was a drawer built into the desk, flush with the wood. It had no handle, just a small circular hole. Romy reached in her pocket and pulled out the key. When she turned it inside the hole, the drawer popped open with a snap. Inside, there was only one thing. A journal. Black leather. Hand-stitched spine. Twine holding it shut. It was the exact one she saw in the blurred text message photo. She picked it up. It was heavy, like it carried the weight of her entire family, like it had seen things. She untied the string, opened the cover, and what she read first didn't scare her. It devastated her. "This is not a confession. This is a burial." That was the first line. Romy sat down on the cold concrete floor, cross-legged, the lamp flickering behind her. She turned the page. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was her father's. Careful, controlled, slanted, almost like it was leaning away from something. Page after page, she read, and the deeper she went, the more it felt like she was meeting a version of her father she never knew existed. A haunted man. A paranoid man. A man obsessed with one thought. He's slipping away. But who was slipping away? Nick? Or Rob himself? Because the next few entries blurred the line. "He stares at me through the window sometimes. I don't think he remembers doing it. He walks the halls at night. Doesn't make a sound. But I can feel him. Michelle says it's just his recovery. She doesn't see it. She never does. He told Romy he saw 2 dads today. One on fire, one made of smoke." Romy paused. She remembered that. She was maybe 11. Nick had taken her to a diner. Drew something on a napkin. 2 stick figures, one with flames, one with no face. He said, "Which one do you think is real?" She thought it was just a game. But now, she wasn't so sure. The entries continued, each one more cryptic than the last. "If I had done something differently in '94, maybe we wouldn't be here. He's looking for the tapes. I have to move them. Michelle suspects something. I saw her in the study when she thought I was asleep. He's not my son anymore. He's something wearing my son's face." Romy froze on that last line, because it didn't sound like her father was writing about mental illness. It sounded like he was describing possession. Not literal. At least, she hoped not. But something had overtaken Nick. Something Rob believed he couldn't stop. Then came a drawing. A rough sketch. It looked like the Reiner house, but not as it existed today. It had a basement. A room that didn't appear on any blueprint. Marked with an X. Underneath it, a single word. Return. Romy had never seen a basement in the house. The Reiner estate was a 1-level architectural marvel. Sprawling, yes, but no downstairs level. Except maybe. She looked again. Next to the X was a note. Behind the wine rack. The original staircase. Covered up in 2001. Her heart began to race. Was this real? Did her father hide an entire part of the house from them? And more importantly, what was down there? But before she could get to that, something else caught her eye. In the back of the journal was a folded page, not attached, just slipped between the last few entries. Different handwriting. Messier. More aggressive. Definitely not her father's. The letter read, "You think you're the only one who remembers. But I watched. You said you'd fix it. You never did." It was signed with a single initial. N. Nick. Romy leaned back against the wall. What the hell was happening? Why was Nick writing to Rob? In Rob's journal. Was he trying to confront him? Or threaten him? And if so, how did this get left behind? She flipped back to the front of the journal. One line she hadn't noticed before, written faintly in the margin. If Romy finds this, I'm sorry, but you need to see what I became. Suddenly, the door creaked. Romy jolted to her feet, clutching the journal like a shield. But it wasn't a cop. It was a woman. Older, quiet, wearing a blue sweater. It was Maria, the housekeeper who had worked for the Reiners for over 20 years. She didn't say anything. She just looked at Romy, eyes full of sadness. Then she walked into the room, reached behind a stack of books, and pulled out a flash drive, handed it to Romy, and said, "Your father told me to give this to you. If he ever died unnaturally." Romy blinked. "What's on it?" Maria hesitated, then answered, "The real story." Romy clutched it in her hand. Everything was unraveling, fast. Her father was dead. Her brother was in jail. And now she had a journal, a cryptic map, a flash drive, and more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a murder. This was a message. And whatever her father was hiding in that secret room was just the beginning. What if everything you remembered about your childhood was a lie? Not the obvious parts. Not birthdays or holiday dinners or blurry photos of Disneyland trips, but the texture of it, the meaning behind the smiles, the things your parents didn't say. Romy Reiner had always believed her family was complicated, but not broken. Now, with her parents dead and her brother accused of killing them, she had to face a possibility that chilled her deeper than any crime scene. What if it didn't just fall apart? What if it was never whole to begin with? Growing up in the Reiner household was like living on a movie set. Everything was curated, perfect, controlled. In public, Rob Reiner was the warm director, the loving husband, the doting father. In private, there were shadows. Michelle was soft-spoken, but constantly tired. She moved like someone who walked on eggshells, even when alone. Nick was quiet, withdrawn. He rarely joined family dinners past age 12. And Romy? She was the glue, the peacemaker. The one who smiled in school photos and told friends, "Yeah, my dad's that Rob Reiner, but he's just dad to me." Except, even that wasn't true. Because just dad had rules. Rules about which rooms you could enter, what you could ask about, who you could invite over. And the biggest rule of all, never talk about Nick. Romy remembered one night in particular. She was 10. Nick was 17, and he'd just come back from a retreat. That's what Rob called it. She thought it meant summer camp. Until she saw the bruises on Nick's arms. She asked him, "Did you fall?" He just looked at her and said, "No, I got up." It made no sense to her at the time. But now, flipping through her father's journal, she realized. Nick had been trying to say something. Something none of them wanted to hear. The Reiner family didn't yell. They didn't throw things or slam doors. Their dysfunction was quieter, cooler, like ice beneath a carpet. You couldn't see it, but step in the wrong spot and the cold shot straight up your spine. Rob kept everything on script. Even family. Birthdays had schedules. Holidays had NDAs for staff. Family meetings were often held with a facilitator, especially once Nick started acting out. At first, it was therapy. Then it wasn't. It was something else. Something behind closed doors. Something expensive. Something clinical. Romy remembered a word her mother whispered once on the phone when she thought no one could hear. Conversion. She didn't know what it meant then. She does now. Nick had always been different. Not dangerous. Just disconnected. He would stare at walls for hours. Talk to himself in fragments. Laugh at things no one else found funny. By 14, he was in and out of psychiatric care. By 16, he was addicted to painkillers. By 18, he disappeared for 6 months. Rob never spoke about it. When reporters asked, he'd say Nick was focusing on his writing. But Romy remembered the night he came back. His head was shaved. He didn't hug her. He just looked at her and said, "You're still clean." She didn't know what he meant. Now she wonders if he meant something more than hygiene. Maybe he meant untainted, unprogrammed, untouched. In Rob's journal, there were pages dedicated to Nick. Paragraphs that read like observation notes. Nick refused to eat again. Hid the utensils. Night terrors are back. Screamed fire inside me in sleep. Asked if I'm still my real self. Then came the guilt. I let them do it. I thought it would help. Michelle said he's broken. But maybe it was us who cracked him. I tried to stop the second round. They said it was too late. Second round? What second round? Romy felt a pit grow in her stomach. Her father wasn't just watching Nick fall apart. He was complicit. Then came a section of the journal dated summer 2001, a year Romy remembered clearly, because that was the summer she and Michelle were sent to Europe for bonding. She thought it was a fun vacation. They went to Paris, Florence, Vienna. No phones, no laptops, just museums and long dinners. But looking back, it was more like exile. Because during those exact 6 weeks, Nick underwent something her father only referred to as Protocol R. He screamed when they strapped him down. I watched from the other room. Couldn't look away. Michelle would never forgive me if she saw. That was the same summer Rob renovated the house. The same time the blueprints of the original estate were altered. The same month a basement storage area was removed from official records. And suddenly, Romy's memories felt like dreams someone had planted. Had her entire childhood been a cover-up? She went to her mother's bedroom, not for comfort, but for proof. There, in the back of Michelle's jewelry box, she found a small, creased letter. It was addressed to no one, but it began with, "If you're reading this, something has gone wrong." Michelle's handwriting was careful, neat, like someone trying to stay composed while falling apart inside. The letter didn't name names, but it told a story about a child born into a family that didn't know how to handle him, about a father desperate to maintain image, about a son pushed into programs that promised change at any cost, and about a daughter who was kept in the light so she'd never look for shadows. Romy read the last line over and over. "If anything happens to me, don't trust the story. Find a journal. And protect Nick, even from himself." That last part hit the hardest. Because how do you protect someone when they're the one who might have pulled the knife? She took the letter and tucked it into the back of the journal. It didn't matter if the police called Nick the suspect. She needed to see the whole picture. And that meant one thing. She needed to find the place her father had drawn, the basement that didn't exist, the one with an X, the one marked return. But first, she needed to understand one final thing. Why had Rob gone through all this? Why the secrecy? Why the journal? And why leave it to her, the one person who never asked questions? Unless he knew she'd be the only one who'd want the answers. She flipped one more page in the journal. A date was scribbled across the top. August 15th, 2023, just months before the murder. It read, "He asked me what happened in '94. I lied. Of course I lied. I couldn't tell him that what happened wasn't an accident, that it was planned, that I chose it." Then a line in bold letters. "He's slipping away, and I think he knows what I did." Romy froze. What did he do? And what happened in 1994, a year before Nick's first disappearance? A year before Rob stopped looking anyone in the eye at the dinner table. Whatever happened that year, whatever truth he buried, it was rising again. And the key to it all might not just be in the basement. It might be in the tapes. Because the next entry read, "I moved the tapes. They're not safe here anymore. But I left one. For her. In the room only I could open. If she finds it, she'll know what happened to her family. And she'll know who Nick really is." Romy stood in the hallway, clutching the journal, her mother's letter, and the flash drive from Maria. She was standing in a house full of ghosts. And only one thing was clear. The past wasn't just haunting the Reiner family. It was calling her back. And what waited for her in that forgotten room beneath the estate was something no one was ever supposed to find. What if your father didn't just keep a diary? What if he used it to confess the things he couldn't say aloud? Not to his wife, not to his children, not even to himself. That's what Romy Reiner found herself confronting as she turned the brittle, ink-smudged pages of the leather-bound journal. It didn't read like a memoir or a reflection. It read like a warning, like a man trying to leave breadcrumbs in the dark, praying someone would find them before the whole house burned down. And the more she read, the more the voice in those pages didn't sound like her father. It sounded like a man trapped inside his own legacy, with no way out but truth. The entries started sparsely, one every few weeks, then every few days, then multiple times a day, like the thoughts were becoming too much to contain. Some were long, rambling paragraphs. Others were short, jittery bursts of panic. "Can't sleep. The sounds are back. Nick's whispering again. Only at night. But Michelle says she doesn't hear it. Found him staring at the fireplace again. Said he saw shapes in the flames. He asked me what I meant by exchange. I told him it was nothing. He laughed, but his eyes didn't. But it wasn't all about Nick." That's what shocked Romy. Her father wasn't just documenting his son's descent. He was documenting his own. I'm seeing things now. Shadows that move just as I turn. Faces in my dreams that look like mine, but older. Or younger. I can't tell anymore. Michelle thinks I'm losing it. But I haven't told her what the man in the mirror said last night. She wouldn't understand. That line. That line. Romy felt it stab her harder than any photo or confession ever could. Because that's how her father operated. Not with fists. Not with shouting. But with secrets. Sealed behind charm. Behind routine. Behind the Hollywood grin that everyone knew. But now, the mask had cracked. And Romy was staring into the hole behind it. Then came the pages that weren't written in sentences at all. Just phrases. Scratched over and over like a mantra. It wasn't supposed to be him. I made a deal. Not like the movies. But real enough. 1994 was the pivot. Everything before was noise. The voices come from the wall behind the books. You can feel it if you sit still enough. That last one made her physically shiver. Because she'd done exactly that as a kid. She remembered it clearly. She had been 5. Sitting on the hardwood floor, waiting for her dad to finish a phone call. She'd leaned against the study wall. Closed her eyes. Felt a vibration. She told her mom later. The walls buzzing. Michelle smiled and said, "That's just the house breathing." But now, she wasn't so sure. The journal shifted tone halfway through. No longer reflective. Almost clinical. Like an experimenter cataloging symptoms. Not his own, but someone else's. And each section was titled. Like chapters. The first one, the silence treatment. It detailed long periods where Nick wouldn't speak. Not to anyone. Not even himself. He would write notes. Draw symbols. Once, Rob wrote. He drew an eye. Over and over. 27 times. On the bathroom mirror. Then scratched it into the wood floor with a fork. That fork was never mentioned in any police report. But Romy remembered stepping on a sharp groove in the hallway floor when she was a teenager. Her mom scolded her for walking barefoot. But now she wondered, had she been walking across a message all along? Another section was titled, The Monarch Reflection. It was shorter, but darker. He said he doesn't dream anymore. Just wakes up in sweat. Says the bed is covered in wings. He keeps asking who the men in suits were. There were no suits. Not that I told him about. I looked up Monarch after he said it again. It's a butterfly, but also a program. Romy's heart skipped. Monarch. She'd heard the name in passing. Conspiracy theorists. Late-night forums. References to trauma-based programming, experimental psychology. Wild stuff. Not the kind of thing you'd expect her dad, Rob Reiner, to write about. But there it was. In his handwriting. And then came a line that stopped her cold. They used to call him the Echo. Because he only spoke in pieces of what we told him. Who is they? And what did they do to Nick? Romy turned the page. More fragments. Michelle begged me to stop it. Said he wasn't our son anymore. I told her we had to finish what we started. He's a mirror now. Shows you what you want until he doesn't. Then one that looked like it had been carved into the page. Doors opened both ways. Underneath, the paper was torn, as if he'd stabbed the pen into it. She closed her eyes. The handwriting was getting messier. Darker. More frantic. But then, something new. A list. No headings. Just names. All real. All recognizable. And next to some, a small symbol. A star. A circle. A question mark. And one, a black triangle. The names included MS, TP, OW, SS, CM, NR. Some were clearly initials. Some, full names, blurred or half erased. She knew what MS stood for. Martin Scorsese, TP, Tyler Perry, OW, Oprah Winfrey, and NR. That one hit hardest. Nick Reiner. Next to his name, a triangle. Filled in. Black. What did it mean? Was this some sort of code? A list of participants? Or victims? The last few entries became almost unreadable. Scrawled like a man in fever. I saw her find the wall. I wasn't supposed to watch. But I did. If Romy reads this, she'll hate me. But she deserves the full story. Even if it kills her to know it. That line hurt more than the others. Because in some way, she had hated him. In that moment. For hiding all this. For watching Nick crumble and doing God knows what behind the scenes. For writing instead of speaking. But most of all, for choosing secrecy over family. And then, one final page. The ink was faint. As if written in candlelight. No date. No signature. Just this. He said he remembers everything now, that I told him to forget, that I took it from him. But you can't steal what someone gives willingly. The basement is not empty. The box is still there. And inside the tape. She'll know what to do. That's when it hit her. The box. The tape. The location. Her father wanted her to find it. Not because he trusted her blindly, but because he knew she would go deeper than anyone else ever could. He had trained her for it. Without her knowing. Every locked door, every withheld answer, every cryptic bedtime story. It was all to prepare her. For this, Romy closed the journal. Her breath heavy. Her palms damp. She had seen into the mind of a man unraveling. And in that unraveling, she saw her family's blueprint. This wasn't just about Nick anymore. It wasn't about murder. It was about design. And the next step wasn't just about reading. It was about watching. Because if the journal was the story, the tape was the proof. And what she found when she pressed play would burn through every lie her family ever told. Have you ever heard a story so unbelievable it sounds more like a conspiracy theory than real life? That's what Romy Reiner thought when she first saw the words Project Monarch in her father's journal. She didn't want to believe it, because Monarch was one of those phrases you read in internet rabbit holes, the kind whispered about on late-night forums, the kind that makes you roll your eyes and say, "That's not real, that's Hollywood." But what if Hollywood wasn't just making it up? What if someone in Hollywood knew because they had seen it? What if someone, like Rob Reiner, had lived it? The phrase Project Monarch appeared 6 times in her father's journal, always in passing, never defined, and always next to entries that felt off. Like this one. Nick doesn't respond to his name anymore. Only the number. They said that was normal during phase 2. I'm not so sure. Or this. The butterfly drawing came back. I didn't tell them. Didn't want them thinking I was keeping artifacts. Artifacts? Numbers? Phases? Romy didn't understand. So she did what anyone would do in the 21st century. She Googled it. Project Monarch pulled up hundreds of pages. Most of them sketchy, poorly designed blogs. YouTube videos with glitchy intros and robotic voiceovers. But a pattern emerged. The same core idea repeated over and over. Monarch was allegedly a mind control program, a spin-off of the CIA's MKUltra experiments. According to the theory, it used trauma, especially early childhood trauma, to fracture the mind, to create alters, separate identities, personalities that could be controlled, manipulated, even triggered by cues. It sounded insane. Science fiction, horror movie stuff. But then she saw something that made her blood run cold. A forum post from 2004. Anonymous user. The title? The Hollywood Protocol. How they train echoes. The word echoes was underlined. And Romy remembered. That's what her father called Nick in one of the journal entries. They used to call him the Echo. She felt a chill spread down her spine. Was it a coincidence? Or a breadcrumb? Digging deeper, Romy found more. An old scanned document, allegedly declassified, though clearly redacted. Parts were blurred, but one line stood out. Subject exhibits typical Monarch traits: dissociation, obedience loops, triggered silence response. It was marked. Monarch subtype, Omega/Echo class. Echo class. There it was again. Suddenly, the dots were connecting. Not clearly, not linearly, but like a broken mirror slowly reforming. Romy remembered something else from the journal. An entry that seemed almost too bizarre to be real. He said the numbers make the walls breathe. I asked which numbers. He said 1123, 33, 4. At the time, she dismissed it. But now, she typed those numbers into a search bar. Nothing at first. Then, one obscure PDF. A page from a now-defunct book titled Trauma-Based Programming and the Creation of Mind Fractures. There it was again. 1123 to 33, 4. Described as a numerical anchor phrase used to trigger repressed memory fragments during echo programming. She felt sick. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be. But what if it was? And then she remembered something even stranger. A videotape. Labeled only. For Romy, after. She had found it in the box hidden behind the false panel in Rob's secret study. A single VHS. She didn't own a VCR anymore, but Maria, the housekeeper, did. Together, they sat in Maria's tiny guest apartment and watched it. What played was grainy, distorted, old, but unmistakable. Rob Reiner, sitting on a wooden chair. And beside him, Nick, 9 years old. Eyes glassy. Face blank. Not blinking. Rob's voice on the tape was calm. Too calm. He looked directly into the camera and said, "This is the third session." He responded well to the flash sequence. But he's begun dissociating earlier than expected. Then he turned to Nick. 11, 23. Nick didn't move. 33. Nick blinked. 4. And then Nick smiled. But it wasn't a child's smile. It was empty. Automatic. Like someone had pulled a lever behind his eyes. Romy turned to Maria. "Is this real?" Maria said nothing. Just nodded. Back in the journal, she found a drawing. A butterfly. Its wings made of broken mirror shards. Underneath, Rob had written, "They said this was the future of obedience. I said it looked like a cage." Then, in darker ink, "But I helped build the cage, didn't I?" That was the line that shattered her, because it meant what she feared most. Her father didn't just observe Project Monarch. He didn't just document it. He participated, maybe even supported it. And Nick? Nick was the test subject. It changed everything. Her understanding of her family, her childhood, her own identity. Was she just the control? The public-facing daughter meant to deflect? Was that why she was sent to Europe during the second round? Was she raised in light to distract from the darkness? She flipped one last page in the journal. Taped to the bottom was a tiny scrap of newsprint. A headline from 1994. Child star disappears after on-set collapse. Mental health concerns raised. She looked closer. It wasn't Nick's name. It was someone else. A boy from another show. Someone who disappeared from the public eye right before Nick had his first episode. Was there a pattern? Were there others? And if so, who else knew? Romy shut the journal. She could barely breathe. Project Monarch wasn't just a theory anymore. Not to her. It was lived experience. Her brother had been through something unspeakable. And her father had helped them do it. Or at least, had stood by. Now, she understood why Rob had written, "If she finds this, she'll hate me." Because in this moment, she did. Not forever. But for this? Yes. Because love without truth is just performance. And Romy was done performing. She needed to find the basement. She needed to find the tapes. But most of all, she needed to find out who else was part of this. Because in Rob's journal, not all the names were crossed out. And the next one on the list might be watching her now. What if the confession you've been waiting for wasn't a confession at all? What if it was a warning? Disguised in someone else's handwriting? Romy Reiner had just begun to grasp the depth of what her father's journal revealed. Project Monarch. Dissociation. The butterfly drawings. Her brother Nick's shattered mind. Her mother's silent pain. And now, a torn page tucked inside the back. But here's the twist. It wasn't written by Rob. The handwriting was uneven. Bold in some parts. Shaky in others. Like someone wrote it while trembling or trying not to cry. And at the bottom of the torn page? A jagged scrawl of a name. Just one letter. N. She stared at the page again, heart thumping. "You think you're the only one who remembers. But I watched. You said you'd fix it. You never did." It wasn't poetic. It was raw. Accusatory. And it read like something that was never meant to be seen. A piece of pain slipped into the journal at the last second, as if Nick had found the journal before she did and left his mark. But that wasn't the only page in his handwriting. The more she flipped, the more marginal scribbles she found. Different pen. Less organized. Paranoid. Emotional. Like this one. "He keeps lying. They all keep lying. No one remembers the fire but me." Or, "They told me it wasn't real. But I remember the screaming. I remember." Written in all caps. Deeply etched. The "I remember" line was so forceful, it bled through to the next page. Romy sat frozen on the hardwood floor of the guest apartment, surrounded by journal pages and Maria's silent gaze. "Is this all from Nick?" she whispered. Maria didn't answer. Instead, she handed her a smaller envelope. Inside, another page, torn from a composition book. Lined paper. Cheap. Smelled like old basement air. More of Nick's writing. But this time, it wasn't anger. It was something else. Grief? Confusion? I saw it again. The red room. The man in the white coat. He smiled when I cried. He asked me about the word I wasn't supposed to say. I told him. Then I woke up. Then below that, how do you confess something that was done to you? And finally, they said I volunteered. I was 7. How does a 7-year-old volunteer for that? Romy's hands trembled. She wasn't just reading a confession. She was reading a psychological autopsy. She closed her eyes and tried to remember Nick at age 7. She couldn't. Photos had been removed. Videos gone. She remembered him better at 5, then again at 10. But 7? Blank. Just a hole in the family's memory. Why? And why did Nick say he woke up after telling the man the forbidden word? What was the forbidden word? Was it a name? A trigger? A code? Suddenly, another piece clicked in her brain. Back in the journal, Rob had written, "He asked me what I meant by exchange. I told him it was nothing." He laughed, but his eyes didn't. Exchange. Forbidden word. Red room. Volunteered at 7. What was this? Some sort of trade? A pact? She didn't want to believe it. But the more she read, the harder it was to deny. Nick had been part of something orchestrated, controlled, systematic. And Rob? He wasn't just a witness. He was involved. Romy returned to the flash drive Maria had given her. She hadn't plugged it in yet, afraid of what might be on it. Now, she felt ready. Inside the drive, 6 video files, labeled with dates. All around the same time frame, 2001 to 2003. Each one titled with a variation of the name NR session. NR. Nick Reiner. She clicked the first one. The screen flickered. Grainy. A static-filled timestamp in the corner. Nick sat alone at a table. 10 years old. He wore headphones. Eyes darting. A woman's voice off-screen asked questions. "Do you remember the beach?" He shook his head. "Do you remember your sister's name?" He hesitated, then answered. Rose something. Romy's breath caught. He didn't remember her. In another clip, he was asked to repeat words. Son. Cage. Obey. Echo. Home. He repeated them in a robotic monotone. The last word, home, made him blink and flinch slightly. A note popped up in the corner of the video, probably added later by Rob or whoever reviewed it. Notice microreaction to home. Indicates potential anchor trigger. Romy's skin crawled. Her brother wasn't being treated. He was being conditioned. The 5th video shook her the most. Nick sat silently, not blinking, just staring into space. A man, not Rob, walked into frame. Gray suit, bald, thick glasses. He leaned close and whispered something to Nick. The mic didn't catch it, but Nick nodded. Then the man asked, "What do you do when the lights turn red?" Nick replied instantly, "Obey." The man smiled, patted his head, and walked out of frame. Romy slammed her laptop shut. This wasn't a confession. It was evidence of programming, of mental manipulation, of something that went far beyond family dysfunction. And the journal entries, the scribbled notes, the missing photos, they weren't fragments. They were clues. Clues to a system designed to erase a person and replace them with a puppet. And Nick? Nick wasn't crazy. Nick was broken. On purpose. She reopened the journal and saw one final scrawl from Nick in the back cover flap. It simply read, "If I did it, it's because they told me to, and I wanted it to stop." Romy dropped the book. She couldn't breathe. She knew what she had to do. She needed to find Nick. Not to ask him why he did it, but to ask him if he even remembers doing it at all. Because if this wasn't a confession, then it was something even more terrifying. It was a triggered event, and whoever programmed Nick might still be out there, waiting, watching, ready to activate the next one. What if your father's darkest secrets weren't just hidden in a journal? What if they were protected by the people you trusted most? As Romy flipped through the back section of Rob Reiner's journal, something unexpected happened. The handwriting changed again. Neater, more deliberate, almost official. It was as if Rob stopped writing like a father and started writing like someone giving instructions or recording classified events. Then came the names. Names Romy recognized. Not just from childhood dinners or red carpet photos, but from history books. There was no title on the page, just a heading. Meeting log, undated. Beneath it, SS expressed concerns about secondary subject. Warned against pushing phase 3 too quickly. OW approved the second funding tranche. Advised discretion moving forward. TP asked if footage was review ready. I told him to speak directly with DM. CM. Denies seeing the boy during stage 1, but her signature is on the clearance sheet. No full names, just initials. But Romy's mind filled in the blanks. SS, Steven Spielberg. OW, Oprah Winfrey. TP, Tyler Perry. CM, could that be Candace Myers, the family's longtime legal consultant? DM might have been a doctor, a handler, a producer, and the boy, Almost certainly Nick. But why would any of these names appear in Rob's private journal, especially in a section that read like intelligence notes? This wasn't family drama anymore. This was networked, funded, and possibly protected. She flipped to the next page. Another list. No titles, just names, some real, some clearly coded. JM, WH, LC, BO, Redbird, Paladin Group, C Contract 7A. Paladin Group? That rang a bell. Romy searched it on her laptop. What she found wasn't on Google's front page, but on the dark edges of the web, a few references surfaced. Paladin Group, a rumored private intelligence and security contractor known for psychological warfare operations, corporate espionage, and trauma-based testing. Allegedly disbanded in 2003. But as Romy now knew, disbanded didn't mean gone. Especially not in this world. Not in her father's world. Romy remembered something else from the night of the murder. A man in a black car had been parked outside the estate. She assumed he was paparazzi. But now she wondered, was he watching? Or waiting? She checked the timestamp on the police log. The car had been noted by officers arriving on scene. Make, Lincoln Town car. Plates unreadable due to angle. No driver found. Was it a coincidence? Or surveillance? She searched the journal for more clues. And then she saw it. If Romy ever gets involved, I pray they leave her out of it. But if they don't, contact Redbird. He owes me. He'll know what to do. Redbird again. This wasn't just a nickname. It was a failsafe. A person. A handler. An informant. Whoever Redbird was, he was the only person Rob trusted to protect Romy. And now, she had to find him. She returned to Maria, the housekeeper. Have you ever heard of someone called Redbird? She asked. Maria's face paled. Yes, she said. Once. 20 years ago. Romy leaned in. He came to the house. Spoke only to your father. They argued. About what? I don't know. But your father said, she's just a child. She hasn't been activated. Who was he talking about? Romy asked. Maria hesitated. I think it was you. Suddenly, everything snapped into place. This wasn't just about Nick. This wasn't just about Project Monarch. It was about Romy, too. She had always believed she was the untouched one, the sibling who slipped through the cracks. But what if she wasn't? What if she had been part of the system all along? What if the reason she didn't remember was because someone had made sure of it? Someone like Redbird. She turned back to the journal and found a small Polaroid taped to the inner flap. Two men. One clearly Rob. The other, a tall, hawk-eyed man in a maroon jacket. On the back of the photo, R+RB, 1994. Redbird. Romy scanned the image into her laptop. Ran it through an open-source facial recognition tool. Match found. Randall Bishop. Former military intelligence. Discharged in 1995. Vanished from public records since. Current status, unknown. But one forum user on a conspiracy site posted a grainy image just 6 months ago. Spotted in Seattle. Older. Using cane. Still watching. That was her lead. She booked a flight. Maria begged her not to go. But Romy had crossed a threshold. She couldn't just read the story anymore. She had to live it. If her father had built a cage around her brother, she would tear it down. If Redbird held the key to her family's secrets, she'd find him, and she'd make him talk. The final clue was buried on the last page of the journal. Faded, handwritten in different ink. It simply said, if Redbird is gone, find the man who wears 2 watches. He knows where the tapes are buried. 2 watches? Was that a metaphor? Or literal? Romy had no idea. But she knew this. She wasn't just uncovering her father's past anymore. She was stepping into a system. And systems don't like to be exposed. If these people had protected her father, then they might be watching her now. Which raised a terrifying question. What would they do? To keep her silent? What would you do if your dead father left you a note? But instead of comforting words or a goodbye, it read like a riddle? A riddle soaked in fear? That's exactly what Romy Reiner held in her trembling hands. A sealed envelope, found inside Rob's private study. It wasn't addressed to my daughter. Not to Romy with love. Not even in case of emergency. Just, Romy, do not open unless everything falls apart. Well, it had. Her parents were dead. Her brother was in jail, accused of murdering them. Her family's reputation was collapsing under the weight of a secret journal, a hidden psychological program, and now, coded names and mysterious figures like Redbird. This letter was the only thing left that could make sense of it all. But what it said didn't bring comfort. It brought questions. She peeled back the flap. Inside, 2 folded pieces of heavy paper. One handwritten, one typed. The typed one was a list. Just coordinates. 10 of them. Latitude and longitude. Some locations had names beside them. Others were blank. One said, Monarch West, 1999. Another, Session 3 Archive, Do Not Disturb. Another, Silo 8, Old Vegas, unlisted. But the one that made her freeze? The last one, Brenner House, 913, West Pacific Grove, Romy's 9th birthday. Her 9th birthday? She couldn't even remember that party. But the address? That was their former summer home. A place her mother always avoided mentioning. Romy's chest tightened. She turned to the handwritten note. This was Rob's voice now. Romy, if you're reading this, then I failed. I wasn't strong enough to stop what I helped begin. I never meant to involve you. You were supposed to stay clean. The last one untouched. Already, the contradiction stung. Hadn't he said the same about Nick? Hadn't he sworn he was trying to protect both of them? Or was it always about appearances? I kept the files hidden as long as I could. But the system we fed never stopped growing. They don't call it Monarch by accident. We believed, that minds could be restructured like DNA. But we were wrong. Romy's heart pounded as she continued. What we did to your brother, what I allowed, was unforgivable. But at the time, it felt like salvation. He was breaking, and I thought this would fix him. Instead, we shattered what was left. She stopped. Tears blurred her vision. Because despite everything, part of her still wanted her dad to be the hero. The man who made the princess bride. The man who told her bedtime stories and kissed her forehead. But this was confession. The tape you'll find beneath the wine cellar floorboards, that's the truth. Not the public truth. Not even the courtroom truth. But what really happened that summer? Romy's breath caught. Wine cellar? There wasn't a wine cellar. Not anymore. It had been sealed off during renovations in 2002. She remembered the workers. The loud hammering. Her father telling her, we're modernizing. Modernizing? Or burying? The letter continued. I left you the journal to fill in the blanks. But the journal only tells my side. The rest? You'll find it in the recordings. Watch them in order. Do not skip. And whatever you do, do not share the 5th file. Burn it. No matter what it shows. Romy's stomach dropped. The 5th file? She hadn't gotten there yet. She'd watched the first 4 on Maria's laptop. And each one revealed more trauma than the last. If the 5th was worse, what could possibly be on it? She didn't want to know. And yet she had to. Rob's final paragraph was the one that broke her. I know I lost the right to ask you for anything. But if you still believe I loved you, then please remember. I didn't hide this from the world. I hid the world from you. And maybe that was the greater sin. It was signed, Dad, not Rob, not RR, just Dad. And it destroyed her. She clutched the letter to her chest and slid to the floor, back against the wall. It was the first time she'd cried since the murder. Not because of grief, but because for the first time she understood. Her father wasn't just a man trapped by secrets. He was a man who trapped his children in those secrets. All in the name of control. All in the name of fixing what was broken. That night, Romy drove back to the Brentwood estate. She didn't tell anyone. She slipped through the back, flashlight in hand. The wine cellar door had been walled up. But Rob's blueprints, found in the study behind the old VHS player, showed an alternate route. Through the pantry, behind the spice rack. She pried it loose. Behind it, a rotted wooden door, sealed with rusted nails. She hammered it open. The smell hit her instantly. Dust, mold, metal, and something else. Something like old film reels and forgotten grief. The cellar was small. Empty shelves. Crumbling brick. But in the corner, beneath a loose tile, a box, taped shut, on the lid, for our view alone. Inside, 6 tapes, one marked with a red X. Tape 5, the one her father warned her to burn. Romy sat in the cellar, flashlight balanced on a stack of old wine boxes. She inserted tape 1 into the old VHS player still rigged to the wall. The screen blinked to life. And what she saw wasn't just a memory. It was a confession. But not Rob's. It was Nick, 9 years old, speaking into a camera. No script. No prompting. Just this. They said I had to be quiet. That if I made noise, the bad man would come back. So I learned to be quiet. He looked down, then whispered, but the noise stayed in my head. The screen went black. Romy took a breath. She was just getting started. The cellar was cold, the air thick with silence. But she knew something now. This wasn't about who killed her parents. It was about what happened to her brother. And the more she dug, the more it became clear. The truth wasn't going to save anyone, but hiding it might destroy everything.